What if quirkless Deku defied his destiny? He was born quirkless. He was told by peoples that he can't become a hero. What if rejects them all and becomes the strongest alive villain on Earth? How would this change everything? Before we start, I want you guys to subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button and also share this video with your friends. It will really mean a lot to me. You can also check other what ifs in the channel. The like aim for this video is 200. Your support keeps me motivated to bring more intriguing what ifs for you guys. Now let's begin. Bane rose to his feet, wiping his lips and staring at the man in front of him. All for one, was it? He questioned, peering around the dimly lit room. The only source of light in front of All for One was a slew of screens, one of which was a stream from the bar he had just left. This was a terrible situation. Bane was in a strange area with a man he knew nothing about, and his venom was about to run out, leaving him debilitated. There's no need to be so wary, Izuku Midoriya. I simply wanted to speak to you. Bane's emerald eyes flared with disbelief, then rage as they bore into the space where All for One's gaze once were. All for One just grinned. No need for such a stare, my friend. After all, what kind of teacher would I be if I didn't know who my precious student was hanging out with? He asked, swiveling his chair to face Izuku. What do you want? Bane questioned, feeling like a caged animal. The man in front of him had done something he hadn't seen in months, and he had unsettled him. Believe me when I say I have no intention of revealing your identity to anyone. After all, I can't go into a police station looking like this, can I? He chuckled. No, if anything, I'm enamored with you. You, a quirkless boy, have cultivated a strength all your own that allows you to stand toe-to-toe with the best. Bane gritted his teeth as green steam erupted from his body, causing him to shrink slightly and stumble slightly. But he would not fall. He would not show weakness to this man. Before speaking, All for One observed the scene silently. Interesting, a time limit, he added before extending his right hand, his fingers turning black with red lines flowing through them before stretching from his palm and sinking themselves in Izuku's chest. Bane had no time to respond since his muscles were fatigued. As he felt the fingers pierce his flesh, it seemed like electricity was pouring through him. He grunted in pain before his fingers left him, causing him to collapse to his knees. The first thing he noticed once the pain subsided was an itching in his left side, particularly his arm. He peered at it, watching as the charred flesh slipped away, revealing freshly stitched skin that appeared to have never been injured. This display occurred all over his left side and deeper. The crash from having so much venom in his system had not gone away, but it had been minimized. He stood up again, this time glancing at All for One. He inquired, what did you do? All for One grinned again. I simply righted the wrong that fate handed you. You are no longer quirkless. I have given you one of my many quirks. It's called Regenerate. Any wound will be healed in moments, as long as you have the energy to facilitate it. This is my gift to you for keeping Tomoura safe when I couldn't. Bane looked at himself as the healing stopped, having fully restored him. He flexed his arms, feeling just little pain. You have a quirk that gives quirks? He inquired, his gaze fixed on all bar one who shook his head. That's only half of it. My quirk, like my name, is All for One. I can take quirks from anyone and give them to others or keep them for myself. I have over 100 years' worth of quirks in my possession. Bane's eyes widened. What he was claiming was impossible. Such a crazy power could not exist, and no one knew about it. All for One laughed. I see why you wear a mask. Your emotions are far too easy to read. But it's true, I have lived over 100 years, thanks to a combination of longevity and healing quirks. But in all my years I have never come across someone like you. A keen and dexterous mind far beyond your years. And I want a man like you by Tomoura's side. Bane looked at him as he calmed down, deciding to just accept what was told. There's that mental dexterity I mentioned. Now I'm sure you have questions, so let me start at the beginning. When all these people had no leader, they had no support against the growing hatred and jealousy of the normal people. I became their symbol to show them that they need not be afraid as long as they stuck together behind me. They nodded, understanding the rationale in a chaotic moment in society, when persons with peculiarities were being persecuted, would no likely follow anyone who promised shelter. I had a younger brother who I thought at the time was like you, quirkless. He was sickly and weak, so I wanted to protect him, so I gave him a quirk, nothing flashy, just the ability to store power. But he didn't agree with my methods and turned against him, and unknown to both of us, my brother did have a quirk. The ability to pass on his power, combined that with the ability I gave him, and you get what his successors call one for all. He passed that power on without my noticing, and thus began the line of heroes my brother created to bring me down. This power has passed down through 8 people. I killed the last person to have it, and nearly did so with its current holder, All Might, but instead we were both dealt grievous injuries and forced to retreat. Bane took a look at All for One. You're telling me that All Might's enormous strength is a hand-me-down from you? He questioned, smiling and then laughing. We truly are opposites, aren't we? He was just given power. That's what I hate about all the people with quirks. They were just lucky to get the powers they have, and they looked down on me because I wasn't, and All Might is the perfect example of being lucky. That's all that separated me from everyone else. Bane took a breath, closing his eyes before opening them again. That's good because now I've earned my power, and I'll show them that luck can't save them. All for One couldn't see Bane, but he could sense the passion in this man's stare even without his eyes. And that's another reason I called you here. What is this drug that gives you so much power? Bane glared at All for One. He may have given him a court to protect his pet project, but that didn't earn him Bane's trust, but he'd offer him something after all. He already knew about his venom, and didn't need him to hold that over his head. It's called Venom, and it's a super steroid I created that increases my strength several times over with each dose, because I didn't have a quirk, so my physical strength and mind were all I had, and people always underestimate strength quirks, thinking they're all idiots who just know how to throw a punch. All for One nodded. I agree that strength quirks are simple, but in the right hands, they can be extremely effective. The reason I ask is because Bane cut All for One off, as he noticed one of the screens depicting numerous humans in big chemical vats. You want to use it on your Nomu, right? He said, knowing he was correct. Venom is a delicate cocktail of multiple drugs. It'll affect them, but I'm not sure how because they do have quirks, multiple ones each, I'm assuming, he explained, glancing to All for One, who nodded in agreement. Tell me what you want, and why you're using Tomuer. All for One returned to his wall screen, focusing on the image of the bar and Tomuer being patched up by the doctor. Tomuer is my goal. I want him to be the new me. I know he's not much right now. Nothing more than a child who enjoys breaking things, but that's why he needs you. True evil has ambitions, goals to accomplish. Anything else is just petty crime. I'm hoping by associating with you he'll understand that and grow. I know giving us the key to your strength is not something you're inclined to do, but I want to bring this city to its knees before me, and for the time being, siding with you guys seems like the right thing to do. I'll give you my venom, but only I will work with it, so if you want my venom, give me a lab and some of your Nomu. I'll take care of it and let you know when it's finished. Here's to a long partnership, he added, extending his hand and teleporting Bane back to the bar. Tomuer had been staring at the location where Bane had left. He was worried till the doctor informed him that the master desired to talk with Bane. Tomuer was concerned because his master no longer spoke to him face to face, but Bane got to meet him after only one task. Before the doctor slammed Tomuer's hand, he grabbed for the bandages wrapped around his arm, intending to itch the wounds. Don't scratch them, you might infect them, he said, referring to Tomuer's broken and filthy fingernails. Tomuer grumbled as he gazed at the doctor, contemplating pulling his silly mustache off his face, but Bane appeared in the bar again before he could do so. He appeared to have entirely recovered, with no visible scars, although he was smaller than before he left. Bane grabbed his backpack and made his way to the front entrance. Wait, what did Master say? Tomuer stood up, hissing slightly as the gunshot holes in his legs throbbed. Bane wanted nothing more than to depart. He was fatigued, regeneration or not, his body needed rest, but he turned around recalling All for One's words. He gave me a reason to stay here, and now I'm going to gather my strength, and you should do the same. To put it into words, we cleared level 1, so we need to assemble a new party, because level 2 is going to be that much harder, he said as he left the bar, shouldering the bag containing his ruined costume. Tomuer sat down and nodded as he looked at the door. Yeah, level 2. He muttered as the doctor was worked out by Kurogiri, who took off his shattered neck armor, seeing Bane's hand imprint in the metal, and realizing how close he'd been to being hurt. Bane walked home, his mind preoccupied with plotting and a slight smile on his face. You made a mistake, All for One, and I have no desire to be your henchman. There can only be one top dog in this town, and that will be me. I'll play your game for the time being, but when the moment arises, I'll dethrone you and take your throne for myself. He pondered as he entered his room, unlocked the door, dumped his suitcase in the neighboring closet, grabbed his laptop and crawled into bed. He needed an inner circle of his own people who were loyal to him and him alone, if he was going to take down All for One. Bane looked through Japan's most wanted list, which was like browsing through dozens of resumes, and found a couple that piqued his curiosity. He then turned to active crimes in the city, where he discovered an intriguing one concerning a sequence of bodies drained completely of blood. He'd taken the time to study about hacking since staying informed about what the cops knew and didn't know was always beneficial. It appears that I'll have my work cut out for me, but for now, I need to sleep, Bane said as he turned off his computer and slid into a deep sleep. The next day at UA was a somber one, with courses postponed as the staff locked themselves in the conference room to discuss what had happened, with the exception of All Might, who had some personal concerns to deal with. This is ridiculous, the semester hasn't even started yet, and this happens, one of our students gravely injured, not to mention what happened to Eraserhead in 13. President Mick exclaimed, feeling awful for his friend. Something needs to be done. Increasing security won't solve everything. I believe we should cancel the sports festival and focus solely on improving the students' abilities. They were lucky this time, but we can't rely on that again, Snipe remarked, leaning forward onto the table. That's just going to show weakness to the public. The sports festival is the cornerstone of UA. The entire world looks forward to it, and it directly links to where and how our students get their internships. We can't just take that away from them, Midnight stated, eliciting a murmur of agreement from the audience. Principal Nezu coughed, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. I agree with Snipe that the sports festival is not our priority at the moment, but it will be held. I propose that we do things out of order. Normally, we do the sports festival, send the students on their internships, and then have the training camp over the summer. I'm going to rearrange that. We will hold the sports festival ahead of schedule, getting it out of the way as quickly as possible, before the villains can mount another attack if that was their goal. Then, All Might sat in a top-floor office on a 5-story building. The building's name was Night Eye Hero Agency. Night Eye, his old sidekick, stood at the desk, a tall, slender man with green hair with blonde streaks and glasses dressed in a sharp green suit. All Might sat on a couch at the coffee table, a tall blonde young man in front of him. And that's the story of One for All and All for One, All Might remarked, lying back against a couch, his bony figure scarcely making an impression in the cushions. I know it's a lot to take in, young Mirio, but knowing this, will you accept my power? All Might asked, his gaze fixed on Mirio's. Mirio jumped up and gave an okay sign without skipping a beat. But of course I will, All Might, that's what a hero does, accepts burdens too heavy for any one man. Toshinori nodded, smiling. Not a second of hesitation. Very well then, if it's alright with you Night Eye, I'll be taking your pupil under my wing for a bit. All Might stated, rising up, his pinstriped yellow suit hanging off him like a coat rack, looking at his former sidekick. Night Eye shook his head dismissively. There's no problem, I'm just glad you realized before it was too late, All Might, Night Eye said to Mirio. I've mentored him to be your ultimate successor, so there's no need to worry about entrusting him with your power. Mirio grinned broadly at his mentor's compliment. Thank you very much, sir. Being a week later than normal, it was no surprise that he'd taken 3 doses of venom in such a short period of time. There would be consequences. He rolled out of bed, stretched as he undressed before walking to the shower and ready for the day ahead of him. He needed to find the first candidate on his list, and he knew exactly where to look. After coming out of the shower, he opened his laptop and looked for a recent crime report, primarily ones in which the victims were battered to death, leaving nothing but a bloody pulp behind. If what I've read is any indication, he shouldn't be that difficult to track, especially if he's close, he added as he dressed, glancing over the reports. Bane went into the kitchen to cook some breakfast. It wasn't anything special, but he needed to eat a lot of calories to compensate for what Venom had taken. He piled eggs, bacon, and bread on his plate, before washing it down with a glass of milk. Looking through his phone, he saw an email with an address, no likely from All for One. As he went, he grabbed some of his chemicals in a backpack and left the dishes in the sink. He went there after discovering it on the map. It was a plain building in Camino Ward. He stood in a corner for approximately an hour, observing the foot movement and finding it to be negligible. At the very least, I don't have to worry about being discovered. He was thinking to himself as he walked up to the structure and hopped the stone wall. Bane strode up to the door, found a key under a nearby rock, and let himself in. Looking around, he discovered 4 chemical vats holding Nomu, as well as all of the lab equipment he would ever require. Well, this will definitely speed things up, but first, Bane examined the room, discovering several bugs and small cameras as he pondered. Sorry, no peeking, he remarked before crushing the small electronics and going to work on his experimentation. Bane spent the next 3 weeks experimenting on the Nomu, fine-tuning his venom so that it would work on any Nomu, regardless of quirk set. After all, venom was a designer drug he'd created for himself, someone without a quirk, but because venom was developed from a medicine meant to increase oddities, it was relatively simple to use on the Nomu, but the trouble stemmed from the fact that each Nomu had many quirks, each one unique. Making venom into a one-size-fits-all medicine for the Nomu was extremely tough, but also extremely satisfying. By incorporating the results into his own venom, he could go so much further with it than if he'd been testing it on regular humans. During this time, he'd also begun to become acquainted with his regeneration quirk. He discovered that while skin wounds healed in seconds, shattered bones took minutes to repair, depending on the severity of each. He even appeared to be immune to poisons after checking his blood after being exposed to arsenic and other toxins, but the most significant benefit was that his venom intake had been increased. He could now comfortably take 3 venom dosages with few side effects. Speaking about venom intake, because the Nomu's minds were virtually dead, they could handle a steady supply of venom without going insane, which he'd taken advantage of by creating tubes to inject venom directly into their brains. They'd be on a constant venom rush, able to take and deal massive amounts of damage. Looking at them, he exclaimed, "My perfect soldiers." It was difficult to keep All for One and his doctor informed with just enough information, but it appeared to be working. He'd begun giving All for One with his blanket venom, but refused to give up the 4 he had, claiming he could accomplish more with subjects who had previously been introduced to venom. They were willing to comply with his request given the amount of venom they were receiving. These 4 would be his to command and his alone. The venom he was providing All for One was little compared to what he could now generate for himself, therefore they would get the more specialized dosage to precisely increase the idiosyncrasies they possessed. He felt better about testing his venom on these stupid beings in the beginning, since he'd marketed his prototype venom like a fake trigger, and although it was their vulnerability that allowed him to use them as guinea pigs, witnessing people go insane and die left a nasty taste in his mouth. Bane stored his chemicals in a small hull he dug out behind the vats after hours of mixing chemicals, making sure to take his notebooks holding the information he'd learned today with him. It was getting close to sundown, so it was a good time to go chat with his unaware informant. Bane boarded a train to a nearby city, arriving late at night, and making his way to the city's red light district. He finally tracked down the girl who did a run-in with his first recruit. She'd gone to the ground, no doubt terrified of what the man she'd snitched on was capable of. It made him smile because the thought of this area used to make him flush, and now that he could stroll through ignoring the lusty stares of the women there, he decided to take advantage of it and approached one. She had 6 arms, red skin, and a big horn jutting from her forehead. "Oh my, you're a big one, aren't you?" she remarked, her hands extending all over him, smiling. He sneezed. "I'm looking for someone," he said, hoping she could help. She gave him a huge smile, showing all of her shark-like teeth. "Me too, darling, so let's just get to it," she replied as she hooked her leg around his. He groaned and held up a photo of the girl he was looking for. "Where is she? I know this is her usual area." The girl took a step back and examined him. Bane grinned as she walked away, saying, "If you're not here for me, I can't help you." He hoped she'd give up quickly and stop lying to him. After a few moments, he began to follow her, and she brought him precisely to where he needed to be. She walked up the stairs of an apartment complex and knocked on an apartment door, which was opened by the girl he was seeking for, allowing the red girl inside. "Now to wait," he murmured, sitting in the alleyway's shadow, and tossed his backpack onto one of the roofs above him to recover later. Bane began to believe that he needed to get rid of All for One, but he wasn't naive enough to assume that he could kill someone who'd already lived over 100 years, and traded blows with All Might before being injured so easily. No, an outright attack would result in his death. Something more subtle was required. Bane was plotting when he noticed another person peering into the small flat. Taking notice of the individual's size, he knew this was the person he was looking for, but he chose to wait a little longer to see what occurred. The red-skinned prostitute quickly departed, hugging her buddy before leaving soon after the mystery man made his move, coming up to the door, grabbing the doorknob, forcing the door open, and walking in. Bane crossed the street to make sure no one had seen the forced entry, before making his way up to and entering the flat. Bane grabbed one of his new patches, a green sticker in the shape of a V, ripping it from its backing and slapping it onto his chest, feeling the patch melt against his skin, as it inundated him with his newly modified venom. The patch he was making now was comparable to 3 dosages of his previous serum. His muscles bulged beneath his skin, significantly increasing his height and bulk. He rounded the corner, releasing a long breath, to discover a massive blonde man holding the prostitute he'd been looking for by the neck against the wall. Mary, would you have to go and do something stupid like rat me out to the cops?" he demanded, his fist tightening, the lady wheezing as her throat was pushed closed. "I was going to let you live, now I've got to come back here instead of finding my new partner," he growled, slamming his hand and the back of her head against the wall, blood splattering against the surface as he let go, dropping the limp form to the ground. From behind the huge male, Bane clapped. "A little drawn out, but glad you finished it. I don't want her blabbing about what we're going to discuss, Muscular." Muscular turned around and smiled. "Looks like it's a 2-for-1 tonight," Muscular said as he rushed towards Bane at breakneck speed, rearing back as muscle fibers tore from his flesh, curling around his arm as it thrust his fist forward, only to be intercepted by Bane's hand, the contact rocking the flat. Bane grinned. "I figured this would happen. Thank you for the opportunity to test out my new venom," he added, dragging Muscular forward into a headbutt that smashed the killer's nose as he let him go, driving a punch into his gut. Muscular stumbled back, clutching his nose and stomach, staring at the man in front of him. Nobody had ever beaten him so easily. Muscular roared as muscle fibers sprang from his jeans, propelling him forward. He linked hands with Bane, pushing him back and through a wall into another flat, hearing the occupants scream as the two smashed to the floor. Muscular drew his fist back to throw a punch only to be punched in the shoulder, throwing off his blow as it crashed into the floor, causing it to give way as the two titans fell through, but Bane grabbed Muscular's arm and twisted in midair, to put the criminal under him, and drove him into the ground, placing his boot on Muscular's neck as he stared down at him. Muscular stared at the man on top of him, and sought to tear his arm free, but Bane's grip didn't budge, no matter how much power he applied. It was unthinkable for Muscular to lose in terms of physical strength. "Who the hell are you?" he exclaimed. Bane smirked as he stepped away from him and let grip of his arm. "I'm Bane, and I want you to come with me and rampage to your heart's content," Bane stated, giving his hand to the assassin. Muscular lay down for a bit, staring up at the man in front of him, the gleam in his eyes sending a rush through his body. Muscular laughed as he heard police sirens in the distance. As the breaker hauled him to his feet, he grabbed Bane's hand. "To my heart's content. I knew you were the only guy I could work with. Let's fuck shit up, boss," he remarked as Bane clutched his palm tightly in agreement. We should leave. I'm not ready to engage the heroes yet. I have more recruits to find, he said, darting out of the vacant flat, and then using his newfound power to propel himself to the next rooftop, Muscular hot on his tail as the cops reached the corner. Bane paused for a while as he gathered his rucksack, checking to ensure they hadn't been discovered during their escape before proceeding with Muscular. He returned the killer to the lab with the Nomu. After all, he didn't want Muscular to live with him, and having a homicidal guard dog like him would keep All for One from sending one of his pawns to spy on him. If anyone else comes here, kill them, he said to Muscular, who delighted at the prospect of murdering someone. Got you, boss, he muttered as he walked over to the 4 Nomu in their vats, each perforated with tubes that pumped a continual supply of venom into them. What's the deal with these ugly fucks? Muscular said as Bane prepared to depart. They're the grunts who will lay the groundwork for me to take this city, he explained as he turned to depart when his phone rang. It was Kurogiri. What is it? He questioned, pausing just outside the door. We request your presence at the bar. Where are you? Kurogiri asked into his ear. Bane sighed, not wanting to deal with Tomiura and the League at the moment. Tomiura was upset that people assumed Bane was the leader of the League of Villains, based on the few chats he'd had with All for One's doctor regarding the Nomu. Still, he had to perform the role that All for One had assigned to him as Tomiura's mentor on the path of villainy. Bane informed Kurogiri that he was in the lab, and a portal appeared in front of him. Bane was walking through when he heard the conclusion of a phrase. I came for him, Bane said, his gaze fixed on the red eyes of Stain the hero killer. He was on his knees over Tomiura, a knife in his shoulder and a sword pointing towards Bane. Bane was drawn to the 2 of the males in the room. One with black hair and a patchwork of scars over his visible flesh, and the other a lizard man dressed in a scarf around his neck and a piece of fabric as his mask. Bane stared down at Tomiura, then at Kurogiri, who was slouching against the bar and bleeding from his arm. He muttered something under his breath. What have you fools gotten me into? Bane locked eyes with Stain as he rose from his vantage point over Tomiura, sheathing his blade and approaching him. So you're Bane, Stain said as he examined the child in front of him. It was surprising to learn that someone so young had taken such significant moves towards remaking the world as Stain had. And you're the hero killer, Stain, Bane continued, looking into his eyes, which were burning with an unknown fury. He began to consider how he could utilize this individual to further his own objectives. Stain and Tomiura were obviously not on the greatest of terms, given what he'd come into, which worked in his favor. He'd be a powerful ally if he could have Stain on his side more than Tomiura. These 2 brought me here, and the only reason I and my apprentices came was to speak with you, but instead I was met with this demented fool, Stain stated, pointing to Tomiura, who was standing up and glaring at Stain, but Bane felt some of that hatred focused at him as well. You wanted to speak with me, what about? Bane questioned, deciding to ignore Tomiura's insult because if he gave in, Tomiura would lose his shite, and he didn't want to cope with it. Don't ignore me, yelled Tomiura at the 2. This is my league. I built it, and I am its leader, not Bane. You will respect me, or I'll kill the both of you, he said, flexing his fingers in preparation for an assault. Bane clenched his teeth, knowing that for better or worse, he still needed Tomiura for the time being. He couldn't risk the league breaking up just yet. He's right, Tomiura did build this league. Think of me as a free agent lending my time here, so I'm still free to speak with you, Bane shrugged. For the time being, give this league to Tomiura. Tomiura straightened up when he realized Bane understood his place in this organization, but he still wanted to murder Stain for stabbing him and renewing some of his wounds. Before speaking to Bane again, Stain gazed between them. I don't care if you're the leader or not. What is your goal? What drives you to do what you do? Just know that if I don't like your answer, you and this league will die by our hands, Stain threatened as the scarred man and lizard male by the door both took active stances. My goal is simple: true power, strength surpassing any skill. The people of this world worship at a false altar of power. The number 1 hero is nothing more than the winner of a popularity contest, and the people view that as true power. They're all wrong. Power is terrifying, nothing can stand in the way of it, and I will wield that power to open their eyes to how frail their strength is, Bane said, his green eyes staring into Stain's red ones. You are worthy. Your conviction has convinced me to assist you in your endeavor to change the world, for just like you, I am an agent of change. This world is stagnant because there are no true heroes anymore. All these fakes that pander to the camera make me sick, they should all be purged. There is only one man who deserves the title of hero. The man you fought at Yusche, All Might. It was fanaticism. This man idolized heroes, and anyone who did not correspond to All Might's definition of heroism would perish. It would be a lot easier to work with this man now that he understood him. As Stain and his 2 students exited the bar, Bane stated, I look forward to changing the world with you, Stain. Bane groaned as he looked at Kurogiri, who could now stand on his own 2 feet. Don't ever bring me into something like that again, he hissed, his gaze fixed on Tomiura. I'm not one of your Nomu, Tomiura. I don't mindlessly obey you. Order me around like that again, and I'll break you. Tomiura returned his gaze. Everyone thinks this is your league, your plan, and it makes me sick. I want you gone. Tomiura yelled, charging towards Bane with his palms forward. Bane smirked inwardly, knowing that this would be the ideal opportunity to deactivate Toga. He wouldn't be able to kill him, but he wouldn't mind being bedridden for a time. He was thinking when the TV speakers crackled with all for one speech. Toga, stop. Like a leashed puppy, Toga came to a halt just short of the portals Kurogiri had created to redirect his hands. Bane is here to help you. If it weren't for him, you'd be rotting in a cell somewhere out of my reach. Even now, he's granted you another ally to your cause. You should think about your actions more carefully. Toga dropped his hands like a sullen child and stalked over to the bar, placing his hands fully on it. Bane smirked at this unexpected change of events. He was starting to sever the tie between All for One and his prized student, and since Toga was All for One's only true way to change the world, if that bond was destroyed, All for One would be essentially cut off. Send me back, Kurogiri. I have more work for our master, he murmured as he stepped through the portal, barely suppressing a smile. He'd leave Toga to ruminate on it, hoping that his envy would drive him to act recklessly in an attempt to win back his master's approval. As Bane entered his lab, he spotted a Muscular sleeping in a corner, surrounded by six-packs and a plethora of convenience store meals. He had clearly made himself at home. Bane thought to himself as he walked away. Now I need to get to work finding my next recruit, he muttered as he walked through the streets, noting that it was nearly sunrise. He decided to spend the next few days investigating his next target after he slept. Kenji Hikiishi was wandering around the park, soaking in the warm sunlight on her skin, and brushing part of her maroon hair out of her face, as she looked about for decent people to kill. She was dressed in white trimmed triangle sunglasses, an orange button-up shirt, blue trousers, and running shoes. She continued walking down the path, looking this way and that, looking for the right victim, and soon she saw him, standing at the entrance to one of the park's jogging routes, a green-haired youngster. His hair was styled in a crew cut, and he was dressed in a grey muscle shirt, running shorts, and red running shoes. He was stretching, and Kenji couldn't keep her gaze away from him. The tight muscle pulsing beneath his flesh was visible to her. Ooh, a difficult guy. They're all tough at first. She reflected as she approached to say hi. Hi there, I haven't seen you around before. She murmured in greeting as the male turned to face her. His rough features were embellished with vibrant green eyes and beautiful freckles. Oh yes, he's just my type. She reflected as the male looked her over. I'm new here, bro. I heard this park had one of the toughest trails in the city, so I had to come. Friends call me Shidanki, nice to meet you. Care to keep me company on the trail? He offered, lifting a thumb towards the way in question. Kenji nodded as she watched Shidanki go down the path. You couldn't have picked a nicer day to die, Shidanki, Kenji exclaimed as she chased after him, Shidanki running in front of her. His strong legs devoured the trail like it was nothing. It took a lot of work to keep up with Shidanki, but Kenji wasn't planned on finishing this path with him anyhow. Kenji decided to make her move after they were far enough away from the trail's head, and there was no one else nearby. She sped up, her legs propelling her right into Shidanki. Her heart was pumping, but not from the exertion of sprinting, but from the exhilaration she had every time she was ready to kill. She could already picture herself shattering Shidanki's body to bits. But don't worry, I'll leave that lovely face alone. I guarantee it. Kenji thought to herself as she pushed herself at Shidanki's back, ready to punch him in the spine. Shidanki spun on his heel, grabbing Kenji's face and smashing her glasses into her face. As he slammed Kenji into the path's dirt, a large cloud of dust erupting around the two, as Shidanki placed his left foot on Kenji's right wrist and his right knee on Kenji's left forearm. I was wondering when you were going to make your move, Magne, Kenji said, his eyes widening in surprise between Shidanki's fingertips on his face. How do you know who I am? Kenji asked, his eyes formerly bright green, but now black with delight like a predator savoring its meal. You were probably too preoccupied with imagining killing me to notice my name. I said people call me Shidanki, remember? Magne's brow furrowed in perplexity. What was so remarkable about Shidanki? Magne wondered how that could have given her any warning about this man, but then he remembered that Shidanki translated as breaker in English. Magne's eyes widened in surprise as she saw it was Bane. It had recently been revealed that Death Arms had been forced to retire due to his injuries from Bane, which a reporter had dubbed the great break of the hero's career, and that Bane had broken the back of a student. With these two events so close together, many people had come to refer to Bane as the Breaker. Bane let go of Magne as he recognized the wickedness in his eyes. I see you put it all together, which is good because it saves me an introduction. Now, Magne, I've come to ask you to join me. Magne sat up, tossing her broken glasses aside as she gazed up at Bane. You could have just said so you didn't have to get so rough with me. I'm a tender maiden after all. She exclaimed, getting up and patting the dust from her back and buttocks. Bane shook his head. I had to know you were the right person because I don't have your phone number, and if I hadn't been so aggressive with you, there'd be no way you'd stick around long enough for us to talk, he continued, glancing at her. Now, will you join me or not? Bane asked again. It had taken a lot to arrange up this meeting, and he'd gone so far as to expose himself publicly, only to see Magne, a man or, in Magne's opinion, a woman with so many murder convictions. Why should I join you? Magne said, crossing her arms and glancing away for a moment, only to be met with Bane's stare. She blushed and took a step back before Bane grabbed her arm and stopped her. Because you want to be the best version of yourself and live how you see fit, right? Bane said, letting go of her arm and turning his back on her. There's no place for one such as you, Magne. You're a killer for one, and your personal view of reality is something no one will agree on. Come with me, I have a place for you, or don't, and once this city is mine, you'll regret not taking my offer. This is your best chance to live the life you desire, he stated as he walked away. Magne bit her lip before replying, looking down at the arm Bane had grasped. On one condition, Magne replied, taking a step forward as Bane stared over his shoulder at her. Can I call you Big Bro? Bane asked, arching his brow before shrugging. Call me whatever you want, but hurry up because I intend to finish this run and get back, so come on, he shouted as he took off down the path, Magne close behind. Muscular sipped a beer while peering through one of the boss's tubes at his brain or something. I'm not sure what the boss has in store for you ugly fucks, but I'm sure it'll be good, he said, laughing as he chugged the drink, some of it running down the side of his mouth, as he heard the door open behind him. Hey boss, when are we going to tear shit up? I'm getting bored sitting in this place day after day, Muscular remarked, turning around to look at Bane before noticing the other person beside him. Hey, who's this guy? Muscular said as he approached Bane and Magne, flinging an empty beer can into the corner. Bane looked at Muscular before continuing. We'll be leaving soon, Muscular, and this is Magne. She'll be lending me her power in the upcoming conflicts. Muscular gritted his teeth as he looked at the Redeed next to Bane. In what world is this guy she? Are you some kind of fruit? Muscular said, pointing to Magne, who stared at him as he took a step forward. I'd watch your mouth around a lady, you muscle-bound bastard. Magne shouted, fists clenched, as Muscular did the same. The two glared at each other. Enough, yelled Bane, looking down the two of them. You both were chosen by me, remember? If you have a problem with each other, then that means you have a problem with my choices. Is that what you're telling me? Bane said, staring down the two as Magne and Muscular shook their heads no. Good. From this day forward we're a team, which means we need to work together, and that means knowing one another in and out so we can work efficiently. So get ready you two, it's training time. Katsuki gently opened his eyes, moving his head towards the noise that had woken him up. He couldn't see much, but what he did see made his heart race. Izuku, his boyhood pal, was present. He was peeling apples beside his bedside. Izuku? Katsuki asked, unsure, but his vision gradually cleared, revealing the visage of Inko Midoriya. His heart had returned to his stomach. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Because she didn't work, Inko was frequently at the hospital with him, watching over him for his own parents. Sorry dear, it's just me, did I wake you? Inko inquired, placing the apple next to another freshly peeled one. Katsuki coughed, reaching up to wipe the slumber and unshed tears from his face. No, Aunt Inko, Katsuki replied as he tried to sit up, only to feel anguish shoot through his back. He moaned in discomfort and retreated to his bed. Inko leapt into action right away. Katsuki, you must not move, please allow me to assist you, she added, pushing a button on the side of the hospital bed to raise Katsuki into a sitting posture. Would you like anything? An apple, some water, I can call a nurse for you. Katsuki gritted his teeth as Inko fawned over him more than his own mother did, but it was his fault. He was the one who was constantly attempting to do things alone, as if he didn't need anyone, but what stung the most was how much he deserved Inko's generosity. She has no idea I turned Izuku's life into a living nightmare, and I'm too afraid to tell her. I'm pitiful. Katsuki reflected to himself. Inko had been here for a few weeks, taking care of him alongside his own parents, not knowing what type of a jerk he was. No, I have to tell her that this ends today. No, and Inko, that's fine, I don't need anything, I have something to tell you, Katsuki explained, taking a long breath. Inko sat down and listened intently as she sensed Katsuki's next words were serious. I bullied Izuku since we were kids. Every chance I got, I made fun of him for not having a quirk, and mocked him for wanting to be a hero. Anything he did, I belittled it. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. I'd be the best friend Izuku ever had, but I can't, and now I can't even make up for it. I knew, Inko said calmly, taking the knife and one of the apples, and slicing it into bite-sized pieces. Katsuki was taken aback by Inko's reaction. She lifted her gaze from the apple for a brief moment, locking eyes with Katsuki, before returning to her work. I've always known Katsuki, and to be honest, I despised you for it. I wanted to hurt you as badly as you hurt Izuku, and the only reason I didn't was because Izuku begged me not to. Inko inhaled deeply. Izuku made excuse after excuse for you, saying you didn't mean it, or you were being pressured by other kids to make fun of him, and he forgave you for it, because that's what a hero does. I couldn't betray Izuku's resolve to see the good in you, so I sat by as you abused my son. I hate you for it right now, but I know that when Izuku comes home he's going to want, you really should eat something. Katsuki was taken aback by Inko's words. Izuku had been stronger than Katsuki had given him credit for, and the guilt made his bowels churn in misery. He hunched over the plate of apples, tears streaming down his cheeks and onto the plate beneath him. I have something else to tell you, Auntie, and it concerns Bane's identity. There was a knock at the door, followed by All Might and Detective Tsukauchi's arrival. Did we hear you right, young Bakugou? You know Bane's identity. All Might said, shaking his head. Forgive me, Bakugou, I got ahead of myself. Please accept my apology for not coming to see you before this. All Might sank down on his knees, hitting his forehead into the floor. I know nothing I say can make up for the mistake of allowing you to be hurt, but from the bottom of my heart, I offer you my humblest and most heartfelt apology. Bakugou swallowed and shook his head, looking down at his hero on his knees. You have nothing to apologize for, All Might. I brought this on myself. Every last bit of it is a result of what I did. Whether it's karma or divine justice, I accept it as my own fault. No one else is to blame for me losing my quirk and being injured. I say I know who Bane is, but it's just a gut feeling, and Bane himself contradicted my theory, but here goes. I believe that Izuku Midoriya is Bane. How dare you? Exclaimed Inko, staring down at Bakugou's lowered head. You apologize for bullying my son, and then accuse him of being the monster who broke your back. Cried Inko, tears streaming down her cheeks. He was your best friend. My son would never do the things he's done, no matter how much someone deserved it. You're a liar. Inko exclaimed as she gathered her purse and exited the room, past the two males. As he gazed at Bakugou, All Might coughed. Go ahead, young Bakugou, tell us why you think this. All Might scratched his head, as though the name Izuku Midoriya was familiar to him in some way. Bakugou gulped. First and foremost, Bane is aware of Izuku. He mentioned his name to me during our fight, and when I questioned him about it, he said he killed Izuku. Katsuki nearly choked up at having to repeat the villain's words. But Bane was so familiar with me that it was as if he knew everything about me. The things he said about how I start a fight with the right hook, and how he could counter me so easily, as if he knew what I do. Tsukauchi scratched his chin. From what I've seen of Bane, he appears to be a seasoned combatant. It could just be his fighting experience that got the best of you. Still, for Bane to bring up Izuku of his own will is strange. Tsukauchi reflected to himself. If Bane is Izuku, why would he do this to you? After all, you two were friends, right? Tsukauchi wondered. Katsuki shook his head and looked down in shame. He was a friend to me, but I was a bully for him. I bullied him for not having a quirk. Katsuki admitted. The thing that really gets me is what he said right before he injured me. He whispered goodbye Koch-chan. Koch-chan is the name Izuku called me by, and he was the only one who called me that. Tsukauchi nodded in response to the explanation. I see bullying on any level is wrong, and it can lead to outcomes like this, but you said the boy was quirkless, and Bane traded blows with All Might, and that kind of strength could only come from a quirk. Do you have a picture of the Izuku Midoriya? All could inquired, unable to shake the thought that he could know this child. Katsuki went for his phone, browsing through images before delivering one to the #1 hero All Might, who broke out in a cold sweat as he gazed at the boy in the picture, with Tsukauchi staring over his shoulder. It was a picture of Katsuki standing over a little child with green hair who was clearly afraid of Katsuki. That was the boy from the rooftop. All Might coughed, handing back the phone and covering his shaking palm. Thank you, young Bakugou. We'll go now and give you time to rest, Might said as he walked away, Tsukauchi trailing behind him, sensing something was wrong with him. All Might, what's wrong? Tsukauchi inquired as they found themselves in a vacant corridor. All Might turned to face him. I know that boy Tsukauchi. He asked me after I saved him if he could be a hero without a quirk, and I told him no. What if my words put him on this path as a villain? All Might questioned, glancing at Tsukauchi, who shook his head. All Might, listen, I don't think Izuku Midoriya is Bane. After all, we established that he had no quirk, and even you said Bane's blows were on par with yours. No quirkless child could do that, and even if Izuku is Bane, your words were meant to encourage him to pursue other paths. If he took your words as a reason to pursue villainy, that is not your fault. But as I've said, I don't believe Izuku Mido. He took it from his pocket and read the principal's text message. Bane unlocked the latch and opened the gate to a scrapyard he'd begun visiting when he first began ingesting venom. The owner had let him in after he'd used his new strength to crush a few automobiles for the guy, while the owner fixed his crusher. It was good practice, and he'd agreed to forego money in exchange for unlimited access to the scrapyard. The owner was delighted to accept, and it would now be the ideal location for Magne and Muscular to train. The two crooks thrilled him as he led them into the heart of the scrapyard, where the thick walls of scrap metal concealed them. Anyone passing by who heard the noise they were about to make would assume it was the crusher at work. Bane threw the jacket he was wearing into a nearby rusted washing machine. As he stared at his two compatriots, he cracked his knuckles. Muscular could tell because he was continually flexing, and Magne exuded calmness despite her big magnet lying across her shoulders. From now on, we're a team, which means we have to always be in sync, know each other's battle style as well as our own, and until our next assignment, we'll be in here every day training until we're a well-oiled machine of battle. He exclaimed, Magne and Muscular nodding in agreement. Don't worry, boss, I'm the entire battle machine you'll ever need. Muscular boasted. Magne responded, you're a brute, and there's more to battle than physical strength. Brains are more important than strength. Bane used this argument to pull out 3 of his new venom patches. He understood that each of these was worth around 3 doses of his prior venom, so applying 3 patches at the same time would be 9 times more potent. He took a long breath, which would ordinarily be enough to kill him, but he needed to know the boundaries of his healing factor, and he wasn't about to cut off his head to check whether it grew back. He pressed the 3 patches in a circle under his sleeve around his left bicep. The medicine entered his body and immediately began to transform it, as his muscles grew in size to the point where his skin began to tear, but his healing factor took care of it, as his regular stature of 6 feet was increased to that of 8. He panted a little, the pain of the transformation rapidly overshadowed by the tingling sensation of his regeneration, undoing whatever harm had been done. Brain and brawn in perfect harmony is an unbeatable pair, he said to the 2 bickering criminals, as he strolled over to a car and ripped the driver's side open, before flinging it towards the entryway. You 2 need to work together to get past me and honk the horn in that car. If you do that, the exercise is over. If you don't, we'll do it again and again until you can, or until the sun sets. Come at me full force or you won't get anywhere. There will be no breaks. If you stop coming for me, I'll come for you," he said, taking a combat stance and waiting for them to make the first move. Muscular smirked as muscle fibers erupted from his skin, growing him to be higher than Bane. "You think I need this guy to get this done? You're underestimating me, boss," he yelled as he charged at Bane like a good string. Bane groaned, hoping Muscular would at least try to work with Magne, but Muscular, as usual, wouldn't get it unless it was drilled into him. As Muscular approached, he delivered a punch, which Bane sidestepped outside of, grabbed Muscular's arm and spinning and hurling him to the right, seeing him fall into a pile of scrap. As Muscular flew away, Bane observed Magne emerge from his blind corner and swing her massive magnet towards Bane's head. Magne, I assumed, would try to sneak assault Muscular because of his arrogance and impatience. Not a bad idea, but she's relying a little too much on that magnet, Bane thought as he went in close to Magne, trapping the magnet under his arm and preventing it from reaching full momentum before punching Magne in the gut. Magne unexpectedly dropped her weapon to dodge back, but neither was aware of how powerful Bane's punch was, as the wind pressure caused by it pushed Magne backwards, causing her to tumble end over end before recovering her feet. Muscular emerged up behind Bane with a punch pushing his fist into Bane's back and tossing him into the air, causing him to drop Magne's magnet. Bane was stunned to see how much power he had from his new venom, and his amazement left him defenseless. Bane coughed, tasting blood and felt pain fill his spine before being repaired by the tingling of his regeneration. He had the opportunity to go for the car, but instead he charged at me. Bane pondered as he righted himself in midair and fired off another blow, wind rushing down towards Muscular, who deflected with his muscle-clad arms as dust exploded up around him. "Come on, boss, give me more." Bane pounced on Muscular with both feet in his chest, sending the villain to his back on the ground, cratering around the 2. As the magnet crashed into Bane's arms, he knelt over Muscular, spinning and brought his arms up in a boxer's block to stop Magne's swing. Bane felt his skin split and bones crack as he was knocked off Muscular and landed rolling across the ground, making 2 deep furrows in the dirt, and then felt his arms begin to mend as he stood up and looked at his 2 companions. Muscular was lying on his back, coughing loudly. Bane hadn't caved Muscular's chest in because of the quantity of muscle fibers around him. Bane rose up as the dust settled, feeling blood stream down his arms and gritting his teeth as his flesh and bones were reassembled. "All right boys, come on, you haven't even gotten close to that car," Bane teased, waving his hand towards himself in a come on gesture. Magne stared at Bane and realized the magnitude of the man she was working for. Bane, like Muscular, was a tactician as well as a muscle-bound moron. As he stated, brain and brawn are invincible when combined. Magne reflected to herself. "Look, I don't like working with you, but we have to or else he'll pound us flat," Magne exclaimed as Muscular sprang to his feet, spitting blood. "I don't need you to finish this, just stay out of my way," he added, walking forward, ready to continue as Magne gritted her teeth. "We can't beat him alone, you need to work with me." Magne tried again, thinking on how easy it would be to murder this man, but if he did, Bane would certainly kill her. "You do whatever you want, I'm going for it," Muscular said as he charged forward again at Bane. Bane sighed, indicating that it was time to remove the child gloves. He hoped that by being gentle with them, they'd naturally come together, but it appears that more harsh measures were required. Bane moved forward, throwing a punch while Muscular duplicated the motion, sending wind from their hitting fists, blowing away the dust in the air, and shattering some of the windows of the automobiles. Muscular reared back for another blow, but Bane didn't waste time, dropping into a crouch, looped around behind him, grabbed Muscular by the waist, and suplexed Muscular, who lifted his hands above his head to avoid being slammed into the ground. The earth broke as a result of Muscular's wrestling maneuver, yet he was not immobilized. Bane emerged from beneath Muscular as both villains rose to their feet. Bane charged Muscular, attempting a flying knee but colliding with Muscular, who seized Bane in a bear hug, attempting to crush him. Bane smirked as he began to peel Muscular's arms away from him, realizing that no matter how many fibers Muscular layered on, he simply wasn't strong enough to hold Bane. Bane gave one final push before grabbing Muscular's head and hauling him into a headbutt, knocking the villain to his knees, and just as Bane reared back to hit Muscular in the face, a car horn went off. Bane turned around to see Magne inside the automobile he'd thrown in front of her, her hand on the horn. "Thank you for keeping him at bay, you stupid bastard," Magne remarked. Bane smirked as he dragged a groaning Muscular to his feet, blood streaming from Muscular's brow. "You two did well, but we're far from where we need to be, but we're getting there. Muscular, go back to the hideout. Magne, you're free to go, we'll meet here tomorrow where the teams will be switched." Bane's phone rang as he was explaining the plan for tomorrow. He reached for his jacket, pulling out the phone, and recognized the number as Fat Cat's. He hadn't spoken with the underworld broker in a long time. Their most recent encounter was to hook up Fat Cat with Bane's own medication. It was a badly diluted version of his venom, nothing more than a super steroid, no doubt used in the sports world, but it kept the money coming in and Fat Cat happy. "What is it, Fat Cat?" he inquired as he heard his broker respond. "Bane, we have a problem. It appears that there is a spy in my gang, and I need your help to get him out. Meet me at my warehouse outside the city, and I'll explain everything there." The phone conversation was immediately disconnected. Bane massaged his chin when he noticed Muscular and Magne had gone. "It's a good thing I didn't tell them about this," he muttered as he pulled on his jacket and walked to the train station. The train would get him most of the way there, and he'd be able to concentrate on a puzzle he'd been putting off for a while. He'd been looking for the vampire of Musatafu for a time now, but the killer remained a complete mystery. Bane began to ponder as he got into the train, gathering everything he knew about the vampire in his mind. There have been at least a dozen attacks, and all of the victims' blood was totally taken. What wasn't drained was soaked into their garments. With the exception of one or two female victims, the majority of the victims were male, implying a female killer. All of the victims were tortured by being repeatedly sliced. The wounds point to a tiny knife switchblade. Bane ran his hand through his short green hair, trying to piece together a profile of the murderer. Except for the fact that the majority of the victims were adults, there was no link between them. They were all regular individuals. What was the point of drawing their blood? Blood isn't worth much on the illegal market, and if money was the goal, destroying a blood bank would be preferable. No, there must be something more to it, some sort of thrill in killing people and stealing their blood. Perhaps it has something to do with their peculiarity. Bane's musings were interrupted as the door in front of him opened, allowing him to exit. He started the short journey to Fat Cat's warehouse, which he readily found, and noted the car parked out front, only there was no driver. Fat Cat had never driven himself anywhere, as far as he knew. Bane pushed open the door, exposing Fat Cat resting on an old metal drum. Fat Cat leaped off and dashed over to Bane. "Glad you made it. Good news, I caught the spy." Bane crunched the metal of the door in his palm, the venom still running through his body, as he stared down at Fat Cat. "If you caught him, why am I here?" snarled Bane, slamming the door shut behind him. The thought of killing Fat Cat had crossed his mind, especially if his organization was exposed, but he might just murder him for wasting his time. "Easy there, big guy, I didn't have him until right after I called you. See, it was my driver who got wind I was bringing you here and tried to off me, so I took him down and then threw him in there." Fat Cat raised one of his paws at the little restroom located in the back. "So, why haven't you killed him?" Bane wondered as he approached the bathroom. "Oh, I figured you'd want to get whatever information you could out of him after all. You're more suited for torture than me," Fat Cat stated as Bane opened the door, rolling his eyes as he realized Fat Cat merely wanted him here to do his dirty job. Bane's eyes whitened as he opened the door, and he twisted on his heel, catching the blade Fat Cat had meant to stab him with. As he smacked the portly feline away from him, the blade punctured the flesh of his palm. "I can't believe I didn't sense the impending onslaught. I couldn't detect any murderous intent." Bane examined the knife thrust into the back of his hand, then examined the arm he swatted Fat Cat with, which was covered in some sort of goop. "Who are you?" he exclaimed, returning his gaze to the corpse of the actual Fat Cat in the closet. Fat Cat sat on the toilet lid wearing only his trousers, his chest and face crisscrossed with slash marks. His blood had dyed his previously orange and black fur scarlet. He seemed to have died of blood loss after going into shock. He'd been here for at least a week, based on how much blood had seeped into his trousers and dried. The only reason he turned around was to see the corpse in the closet. It was only by chance that he turned in time to stop the knife from cutting his throat. "Oh, you are good. I was about to kill you right there and then, but of course the mighty Bane wouldn't be killed so easily," Fat Cat said in a girl's voice, as the feline face began to peel off, revealing the face of a young girl with golden eyes and big fangs. She jumped away from him and landed behind some boxes. Bane had seen that the girl was naked. He assumed nothing more as she appeared from behind the crates, clothed in an oversized jumper that reached mid-thigh. "My name is Himiko Toga, and I'm Bane's biggest fan, though I had no idea you looked so cute under that mask, though you could stand for a bit more blood on you." Bane gripped the knife in his palm and yanked it out as blood splashed on the ground and dripped from his fingers before the wound began to close. Toga's eyes whitened as her smile broadened. "You really are perfect for me. Anything I do to you, you'll heal from it. I can cut you so much without you dying on me." You're the best, come on, let me cut you, let me join you. Bane arched a brow as he looked back at Fat Cat's ravaged form. You're the vampire of Musatafu, he muttered as he returned to confront Toga, nearly dodging a dagger she'd hurled at him. Boo, you're pretty good at dodging for a big guy, but that's fine because once I join you, I'll have plenty of chances to cut you, so come on, let me join, Bane grumbled. He had been tracking the vampire, but he had no idea she was this insane. After all, he deflected Muscular's blood hunger, so he could do the same here, but the fact she was obsessed on cutting him was an extra nuisance he didn't want to deal with. Why do you want to join me? What's in it for you besides cutting me up? Bane questioned, his face flushed. She'd been infatuated with Bane after witnessing his brutality against Death Arms. It was too much for her to see Bane covered in the hero's blood. From that moment on, she was in love. She tried everything to find Bane, but nothing seemed to work until she heard that this guy Fat Cat knew Bane, so she took him, and then replaced him until she got all the information she needed from him. Fat Cat had been either loyal to Bane or desperate to maintain his meal ticket, but days of agony may change anyone's opinion. You're so mean, acting like you don't know, but fine, I'll play your game. It's because I have a crush on you, silly. You're just like me, you like to hurt people. You know people are only beautiful when they're covered in blood, like you should be. Toga shouted, dashing forward to stab Bane in the chest, and shockingly enough, Bane did nothing to stop her. The blade pierced Bane's chest, though due to the growth of muscle, the blade didn't pierce enough to be fatal. Bane snatched Toga and hugged her to his chest. You want to tear this world to bloody shreds, and I can work with that, he added, looking into Toga's golden eyes with his green ones. She was insane, yet he might still utilize her in the end. Whatever her quirk was, it allowed her to enter places, and he wasn't sure how she disguised such murderous purpose, especially since she was virtually a carbon duplicate of Fat Cat. He needed someone with her skills, or perhaps it was the fact that a girl was paying attention to him. Bane wasn't going to lie to himself about how great it felt to have a girl after him, even if she was insane. Toga's cheeks became bright red as Bane's face approached her. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, as his blood saturated her jumper. Bane threw her to the ground, pulling the knife from his chest, and feeling the wound close. That's the only time I'll let you bleed, me, understand? And if you try again, maybe I'll make you beautiful too, he added, gazing at her before throwing the knife back at her, slicing her cheek as the knife lodged itself in the concrete behind her. If you're going to join me, you're going to be useful. You've been impersonating Fat Cat for days now, right? You're going to continue doing so. You're going to make Fat Cat's organization mine. Bane watched Toga get to her feet, clutching the wound on her cheek. I don't want to be him anymore, I want to be with you. Toga said as she skipped over to him and placed her bleeding palm on Bane's chest. I promise not to cut you anymore if you let me come with you, Toga begged as Bane sighed, contemplating a fresh strategy. Fine, call Fat Cat's men here. Use his voice to make it appear as if he's dying, and tell his men to come to me with his death. Once they contact me, I'll bring them into my fold under the premise that I'll find Fat Cat's killer. Right as you see the men arrive, set the place ablaze. They wouldn't have time to investigate too thoroughly, not with the police and fire department on their way to contain the fire. Are you listening to me? Toga raised his head and nodded. Sure, I heard everything, so where are we going to meet up? Bane pulled an old receipt from his pocket and scribbled down the address for the scrapyard. He remarked as he walked away from her, meet me there tomorrow. Toga had been staring at the bloody palm print she'd left on his chest, before cupping her wounded cheek and smiling. We each marked the other. We're a couple. I can't believe it, I'm so happy. Toga exclaimed as she skipped over to the car, pulling the keys from her jumper, starting it up, driving inside the building and turning it off. She got out of the car and proceeded to the trunk, where she discovered a bottle of antifreeze. She smiled as she carried the bottle to the front door, and began pouring it out in a path that led back to the car, where she dropped it just underneath it. Toga made his way to the building's entrance to summon Fat Cat's men. Bane returned home later that day and turned on the television to watch the UA Sports Festival. He grinned as he watched two students compete. I figured they'd do something like this. Hold the sports festival early, so the villains don't have a chance to regroup and attack. That's fine, I had no intention of attacking the sports festival. Let them have this small win, I'll attack them again once I've got my team in shape. What exactly is it, Kurogiri? He inquired. Sorry to bother you, Bane, but I felt it best to let you know that Tomohiro has taken your advice of gathering allies to heart, and he has his eye on one man in particular, but I think it's too much for him, and our master agrees with me. Bane gritted his teeth, having Kurogiri call all for one. Their master really got under his skin, but he would only have to play this charade for a little while longer. So, what does he want from me? Bane questioned, sitting forward, his gaze drawn to the next two students to clash. If I recall well, Katsuki was in class 1A. I wonder how many of his classmates would finish first. Well, there's no easy way to put it. Tomohiro has his sights set on a death row inmate named Moonfish, which means he wants to break into a prison, Bane said, smiling. You know, that's not a bad idea, Kurogiri. I think Tomohiro has it right. What better place to find villains than in a jail? I'll lend a hand, but this is going to take considerable time, and planning. If Tomohiro agrees to this, I'll be more than happy to help, Bane remarked. Tomoura, as I suspected, is determined to prove himself to all for one. Kurogiri was sweating. He had hoped that Bane would attempt to talk Tomoura out of it, but it appeared that the man was more than prepared to go through with this folly. In fact, he seemed to like it. Before speaking, Kurogiri swallowed. He hung up, saying, "I'll see what I can do to get him to agree." Bane tossed his phone to the side and gazed at the screen of his TV. So it appears Katsuki's class had a clean sweep, with first place going to Endeavor's son Shoto Todoroki, and second place going to Fumikage Tokoyami. The person in third place couldn't be there in person, but her name was announced as Tenya Ida. I'm not surprised Endeavor's son took first place. He was a kid who actually tried to protect All Might from me. I'll have to keep an eye on these three, but for now I need time to plan. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me, and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-ifs coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Goodbye everyone.